Long, long ago, in a kingdom in the south of India, there was the beautiful city of Mahilaropia. And not far from the city was a vast and sprawling banyan tree. And a whole host of animals and creatures found sustenance under this tree. Every day, birds would come to feast on the fruits on the tree. Monkeys would frolic and swing from its branches. The deer sought the shade of the tree from the fierce afternoon sun. On the trunk of the tree, a whole host of insects and swarms of ants made their home. And so this was a veritable universe in itself. One day, a crow called Lagupatanaka made his home on one of the branches. And one morning he was out looking for food. And in the distance, he spotted a rather foul-looking, loathsome hunter. He had with him in one hand a net with which to snare the birds, and in the other, he carried a very stout stick. With his bloodshot eyes and matted hair and fierce frown, he looked like death itself. Oh, thought Lagupatanaka. I know why he's here. He's out to catch all the birds on the tree. So let me go back and warn all my friends. So he flew back and called all his friends and said, a fierce hunter is fast approaching the tree. He's got a net in one hand and poisoned grains of rice in his pocket. He is sure to spread the net on the ground and sprinkle the grains of rice. Do not go anywhere near the grains of rice, for they are poisoned. And if you do, you also run the risk of being entangled in the net. No sooner than Lagupatanaka had finished speaking, the hunter arrived at the tree and did exactly as the crow said he would. He spread out the net, he scattered the grains of rice, and then he went and hid behind a tree. Now the clever birds had been forewarned, so they didn't go anywhere near the grains of rice. Just then, the king of pigeons, Chitragriva, flew overhead. Along with him were his band of followers and friends, and he was looking for food. And when he saw the grains of rice, he was too tempted. Now Lagupatanaka knew what was going to happen next. So he sounded a note of caution. He said, don't go anywhere near those grains. They are poisoned. This is a trap. But Chitragriva was in no mood to heed this warning because one, he was hungry, and two, the grains of rice were too good to pass up. So he and his flock of pigeons all swooped down on the net, and they were well and truly entangled. Now the hunter was delighted. His plan had worked to a T. He came out from hiding and strode purposefully towards the net. Chitragriva saw the hunter fast approaching, and he spoke to his flock. He said, the hunter is fast approaching us. Now I want all of you to stay calm and cool, because it has been said that those who maintain their equanimity during times of trouble can overcome even the greatest difficulties. If we all hang together, we can somehow fly away with this net. And once we're far away from the hunter's reach, we can free ourselves. Remember that alone we cannot stand up to the hunter, but together we can fly away with this net. Just wait for my command, and when it's given, let's all work together. So the pigeons waited for the Chitragriva's command, and once it was given, they all worked as a team and flew together with the net and soared into the sky. The hunter who saw this happening was angry. He said, "Oh, they've flown away with my net. But anyway, let's see how long they hang together. Soon they'll be squabbling and they'll drop down to the ground." So he decided he would follow them. And Lagupatanaka too saw things panning out the way they did. And he said, I'm going to abandon my search for food and see what happens next. Chitragriva kept on motivating his flock. And he led them over dense forests and undulating valleys, terrain which the hunter would find it very, very difficult to follow. And soon the hunter was left far behind. And then they could see him lamenting his plight. And he said, "Not only have I lost a day's catch, they've even taken away my net, my only source of living." When Chitragriva had made sure that the hunter had turned back, he told his flock, "Now we are going to fly towards Mahilaropia. And there in the northeast corner, there lives my friend, Hiranyaka, the mouse. And he will surely help us and get us out of this mess." So the pigeons followed his directions. No Google Maps, mind you. They just followed his instructions, and they arrived at Mahilaropia and alighted at the house of the mouse hole of Hiranyaka. Now Hiranyaka had turned his mouse hole into a veritable fortress. There were secret entrances and exits and tunnels. He had strengthened it so that no predator can ever get in. So once they were there, Chitragriva called out to his friend Hiranyaka and said, "Hiranyaka, please come out. Me and my friends are in a real fix. You've got to help us." But Hiranyaka, being a cautious mouse, didn't answer at first. After repeated pleas, he answered from inside. He said, "Who are you? And what do you want? And what kind of a mess are you in?" And Chitragriva persisted and said, "I'm Chitragriva, the king of pigeons, your friend. Please come out." And then Hiranyaka recognized the voice, and he came out with a sense of anticipation at meeting his long-lost friend. And he was taken aback when he saw the plight they were all in. And he said, "Whatever got you into this mess?" And Chitragriva said, "You know me. You know my greed and my love for food. That's what got me into this mess. Now, please help to get us out of this fix." Hiranyaka couldn't help taking a dig at his friend. He said, "A pigeon can spot a grain of rice from a distance, but he can't see a net on the ground," which makes me think that fate is greater than intelligence sometimes. A sensible bird like you who can soar into the sky falls a prey to the hunter's net. Danger and death lurk everywhere. And with this gyan, he began gnawing the grid of the net where Chitragriva was trapped. And Chitragriva said, "Stop, don't. It's not good if you free me first while all my friends are still entangled." What kind of a cruel king would that make me? And the mouse said, but you are the king. You needed to be freed first. Chitragriva wouldn't have any of it. He said, all my followers have left their homes to be with me. It is said that a king derives his power from the trust that his followers place in him. If I act selfishly, do you think they will repose any trust in me? And then Hiranyaka said, of course, I know the duties of a king. I was just testing you. And he began gnawing the net and started freeing his followers and told Chitragriva, by putting your followers before yourself, you have proven that you are a wise and compassionate king. And when he had gnawed off all the parts of the net, he turned to Chitragriva and the flock of pigeons and said, there you go. You're all free to fly away. And if ever you need any help, do give me a shout. Come here and give me a shout and I will come to your rescue. And he bade them a warm goodbye. And Hiranyaka, the mouse, retreated back into his very secure home. Thank you very much.
This story didn't happen once upon a time. The story of the traveling tree starts about 2,300 years ago. There was a man named the Sakyamuni Buddha who lived in India 2,600 years ago. He was an enlightened human being. He was angry with no one. He was attached to no one. He had compassion for everyone. He was gentle in thought, word, and deed. To him, all beings were equal. He spread the message of loving kindness, mindful living, and the value of letting go. The Sakyamuni Buddha sat under a tree when he attained nirvana or enlightenment in Bodh Gaya in India. That tree was called the Bodhi tree, the tree of enlightenment. About 2,600 years ago, the Sakyamuni Buddha passed away in Kushinagar in India. 300 years after the death of the Buddha, Emperor Asoka embraced Buddhism following the brutal war of Kalinga. After the Kalinga war, the earth of Kalinga had turned to the color of blood. The streams of Kalinga had been bloodied. Women walked here and there looking for their husbands. Mothers wandered like zombies, knowing that their sons were killed by Asoka's army, but not wanting to believe it. Mothers everywhere are like that. In the conquered land, Emperor Asoka looked around. He looked hard, trying to feel great about his victory. He looked for adoration in the eyes of the conquered. He saw none of it. In fact, what he saw was absolute terror. What have I gained from war? Asked Emperor Asoka. What have I gained from beheading thousands of humans? I have gained hundreds of thousands of enemies to replace the lives that I have taken. The Emperor Asoka, after a series of events, embraced Buddhism. He vowed to spread the non-violent message of Buddhism to 9 countries. Emperor Asoka had a son called Mahindra and a daughter named Sangamita. They both had ordained in the Buddhist order. Emperor Asoka's son, Reverend Mahindra, was an enlightened arhat. He traveled to Tambapani, also called Lankadipa, now called Sri Lanka. There, he met the king of Sri Lanka, Tissa, who was hunting for sport. After an interesting conversation, with the king Tissa, Arhat Mahinda was able to convince him to explore Buddhism, and he embraced Buddhism. 7 months after establishing Buddhism in Lankadipa, Arhat Mahinda sent out a word to his father to send his sister Sanghamitta also to Lankadipa. Emperor Asoka's wife, Queen Devi, was against this voyage. My Emperor Lord, we have already dispatched our son, Arhat Mahindra, to Lankadipa. Reverend Sanghamitta, it's your daughter. The sea voyage can be harsh. The rough waters may demolish the ship. And I have heard, my lord, that there are spirits in the waters that hurt those who voyage. My lord, don't send our daughter. I am a mother. One by one, my children are leaving. Mothers everywhere are like that. But the emperor stood his ground. My queen, nothing is for us to keep. No one is ours to cling to. The finest men and women of valor and skill will accompany Reverend Sanghamitta, who was once our daughter. Our daughter now belongs to the Buddhist order. She now belongs not to us, but to the world. She serves men, women, animals, and trees, all sattvas, those sentient beings. She even serves those who feel nothing. Sanghamitta, too, stood her ground. She said to Ashoka, Great king, my brother says that there are so many women who await my arrival to be ordained as nuns. It is absolutely essential that I should go there. Now comes the traveling tree. Emperor Ashoka gave a sampling of the Bodhi, the tree of enlightenment, to Sanghamitta to be taken to Lankadipa, or Sri Lanka as it's now. 10 other Buddhist nuns, aristocrats, priests, poets, craftsmen, jewelers, artists, and artisans joined Sanghamitta and the traveling tree. During the voyage, the travelers faced turbulence. The legend says that the water demons, the Nagas, swirled the water. They shook the ship. They arose to the sky like demonic black storms. The entire ship swayed. The sails of the ship seemed to weep with fear. Sanghamitta, holding on to the traveling tree, remained calm, reflecting on the unpredictability of life. She looked the water demons in their red eye with the calm of her serene eyes. Without uttering a word, she invoked the good deeds she had done, Satyakriya. Her good vibes clashed with the hatred of the water demons in the rainy night sky. And then there was calm, and they sailed on. At the Dambakola harbor of the Lankadipa, King Tissa greeted Sanghamitta, immersing himself in the sea up to his neck out of respect. The king received the traveling tree with great reverence. The traveling tree was planted in the great garden of Mahameuna in the royal city of Anuradhapura in Lankadipa. But my friends, before that, do you wonder what happened to the original Bodhi tree back in India? The original tree in the Bodh Gaya, under which the Sakya Muni enlightened, was destroyed by one of the queens of Emperor Asoka who disagreed with Buddhism. So they planted a sapling from the Bodhi tree. That tree too was destroyed by King Shashanka, who ruled from Bengal. So they planted a sapling from the second Bodhi tree. But alas, the third Bodhi tree was struck by lightning and was destroyed. Yet another sapling was planted. That tree remains in Bodh Gaya today, is the 4th generation of the original Bodhi tree. This traveling tree that came to Lankadipa united the nation and gave birth to a new nation. Despite the changing waves of its origins in Bodh Gaya, the traveling tree called the Sri Mahabodhi that voyaged to Lankadipa remained quiet rallying the nation around. People from all parts of Lankadeepa gathered around it in meditation, silence, and reflection. The sacred ritual of bathing the tree with water began. This disconnected the nation to the idea of sacredness of water and respecting nature. The tree preservers who came here with the traveling tree gave birth to the science of nature preservation in Lankadeep. This tree, the first recorded environmental gift from one nation to another, still survives as the oldest known man-planted tree in the world. With the traveling tree in the backdrop, countless women, including Princess Anula of the royal house of Lankadeepa, and many women from many layers of society, ordained as nuns in the Buddhist order, giving rise to one of the oldest traditions of female emancipation in the world. The numerous artisans who came to protect the tree designed architectural wonders that have survived thousands of years. Poets, writers wrote songs and gatha about this resplendent tree. This traveling tree birthed 8 more samplings that were distributed within the island. These saplings, gave rise to more trees that rallied people around the non-violent philosophy of Buddha. The traveling tree, even today, keeps traveling through the message of peace. When it travels, it rallies us around the idea of selflessness, compassion, and freedom by unchaining our mind. A nation of peace, such peace, to spread peace, was born because of the traveling tree that traveled from India in the hands of Sanghamitra to Lankadeep. Lankadeep has seen much hardship since the traveling tree came here to stay. Despite its tumultuous and stormy past, the traveling tree and the journey of peace will continue. And together, we will spread the idea of compassion, non-violence, and peace. That is the story of the traveling tree from India to Sri Lanka. Thank you.
I will share with you a story about unusual riddles and miller and landlord, and also about envy. Once upon a time, there was a miller who was satisfied with everything. He was a happy man who lived humble and simple life, and he wanted to share his happiness with everyone. And this is why on the wall outside the mill he had a sign, "I am satisfied with everything." But one day, a count, his landlord, passed by this mill, and he saw that sign, and he asked his servant, "What is this? How could it be? I'm a rich man. I have a lot of servants, a lot of gold, silver, diamonds, but I'm not a happy man. And this poor miller, he is a happy man. That's impossible. What does that mean?" he asked his servant. And the servant said to him, well, I don't know. Oh, this is some inscription. All right, I know, said the count. But however, it bothered the count that the miller was happy and he was not. So he went to the miller and said to him, "Good morning, miller. Well, since you are so satisfied, come to me tomorrow, but neither barefoot, neither short, neither bareheaded, neither covered." The miller said, "Okay, thank you. I will do it somehow." So the count went home, but the miller did not know what to do. And the Count was at least a few moments satisfied because he made troubles and worries to the miller. And the miller continued his work. But then a beggar came, and the miller invited him to his mill, and he gave him food and drink. And the beggar was very grateful for the miller's kindness. But suddenly he asked the miller, "What are you worried about?" And the miller answered, "Oh, hear me out. My lord told me to come to his manor tomorrow, neither barefoot nor short, neither bareheaded nor covered." But the beggar said to him, "Oh, that's not difficult. This is simple. Do this. Cut off the soles of your shoes and put on just the upper part of your boots, and cut the bottom of your head and put the brim on your head." So miller next morning went to the Count, neither barefoot nor short, neither bareheaded nor covered. And when he came to the manor, the Lord was surprised and very angry because the miller was so bright and because he solved his task, his riddle. And he said, "No, no, 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 that was too easy. You must solve more riddles." So the Lord gave him 3 riddles to solve. The first one went, "How deep is the sea?" But the miller said to him, "Oh, that's easy. Yesterday I threw a stone in the sea, and today it hit the bottom." And then landlord asked him the second riddle. "Okay, how big is the world?" And the miller said to him, "Oh, that's simple. The world is so big that you and I cannot cross it." And the Count was more and more angry, and he looked through the window and he saw a tree. It was a springtime. Now in Slovenia is springtime. And the leaves on the branches had just grown. And he thought, "Okay, I have now very difficult and impossible riddle. And then he asked the miller, "You see that tree? Tell me, how many leaves are on tree?" But the miller says, "Oh, that's very simple. As many as there are stalks." Then the Count said, "Okay, I see. I can't beat you out. Just go home." And the miller went home. And where the beggar came to him, he gave him food and drink, and he said to him, "You see, together we can solve any riddles." And the miller was satisfied and lived happily ever after.
And I would love to share a story with you from the lands of Anatolia. It was an old story, and it was compiled by a Dutch woman who traveled all around Anatolia in the late 19th, in the beginning of 20th century. And she traveled like a man all around Anatolia, and she collected the tales. Now I'm sharing the tale of Elsa with you today, but this is the Anatolian tale. Once there was a man called Hikmet. Hikmet was a strong and big man, and he was a pirate, and he was ruling all over the 7 seas, and he was in slave trade. And he had no mercy. Hikmet was not a good man at all. He was like an evil. He hadn't even prayed once to God. He never named God, or he never asked anything from God. He never believed in God at all. And he was good with women, of course, and with good drinks and wine. And he was good with mocking with people. And everyone was afraid of Hikmet, actually. Everyone was afraid of him. And once they hear a name of Hikmet, they started to shiver, and Hikmet is coming. Oh, Hikmet is coming to our shores. And everyone was giving to Hikmet because they didn't want them to torture or take their little girls. But he was a man of like that. And of course, he loves drinking and having fun with women and just enjoying himself, but giving nothing to others. And one day, while he was sitting at the deck of his ship and eating and drinking and eating and drinking, when he got drunk enough, he just saw a calabash of water, fresh water, and the newly and freshly baked bread in front of at the edge of the table. And he just stood up and he walked through the calabash of water and bread. And first he took the calabash and poured the water to the sea. And then he teared the bread and throw it to the sea and said, "Oh, fish, come and taste the fresh bread. It's good with the fresh water. Just enjoy." And he started to laugh. When he stopped laughing, another laugh was heard, and he just, who dares to laugh at me? He just looked everywhere, but he couldn't see no one. But when he looked up, he heard the sound again, and he just stood there. Oh, then he suddenly realized that there was a big red bird with his wings all over the ship. And that red-winged bird with green eyes was looking at Hikmet and saying that, "Hikmet, I'm very happy, my son. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Be happy. I was waiting this moment for centuries and centuries and centuries. Don't be afraid, my son. Just wish something from me. Ask something from me and I'll do it, and you'll be my son forever." Hikmet was shivering, but he was not that kind of man that he didn't want to show anyone that he was shivering. And then everyone was just staring them. And the bird said, "Oh, come on, wish something. Wish something. God forgive everything. God has God mercy for everything, but except one thing. And you did this, Hikmet, you did this. God never mercies if you waste water, fresh water and bread, while all your man has cracked lips and had thirst and hunger, while they were starving. If you waste them, this is what I was waiting for. I'm the devil, my son. Don't be afraid. Come and wish something and I'll do it and you'll be mine forever." Hikmet couldn't say a word. He couldn't open his mouth at all. And all of a sudden, that sound like a wave from the ocean, and the little blue drop with a peaceful voice started to talk with Hikmet. And of course, when that blue drop came, that bird, you remember, the red-winged and green-eyed bird just flew and faded away like a flower. And all his ashes melted in the sea and he disappeared. Everyone was heard from him. The last words of that bird was, God, please mercy. And that soft voice started to talk with Hikmet. Hikmet, I know you're a good man in heart. Everyone is good in heart. I believe in that. I can forgive everything. I have mercy for everyone. But Hikmet, this time, it won't be easy for you. I will mercy you. And Hikmet was shivering and saying, God, please mercy, please mercy. Please forgive me. And that little blue drop say, yes, Hikmet, I will mercy. I'll give you mercy. I will forgive you. But in only one condition. Now, from now on, with this ship, you will travel for centuries and centuries and centuries all over the seven seas. And if one day, if someone gives you one drop of fresh water and one piece of baked bread from his or her heart, then I will mercy you. I don't know what happened to Hikmet from that day on, but let me tell you something. If you saw someone who's begging for water and bread, please give it from your heart. Who knows? He may be Hikmet, waiting for the forgiveness.
Somewhere in Kazakhstan, there lived two friends, a farmer and a shepherd. They were neighbors. They lived next to each other on their land. One had a land where he could farm, not too big, but small enough, and profitable enough for him. And the other one had a rocky patch, but he had sheep of his own that he reared on that land. The two friends lived together side by side for many years, until one year, the shepherd lost all his sheep. They died because of a disease, and the shepherd was lost. He didn't know what to do. He went to his farmer friend and said, there's nothing else for me to do. I'm going to sell this piece of land and perhaps move to the bigger city. Perhaps I'll find a job, or maybe I'll beg for a living. There's nothing that I can do on this land. The farmer held on to his friend and said, no, wait. You don't need to leave your land. You don't need to leave me and go away. Our land is good enough for both of us. I'll divide it. I'll give you half of mine, and you can grow whatever you want to grow. This is enough for both of us. Now, the shepherd loved his friend. He was touched by his generosity, his kindness. And he said, no, my friend, this land is yours. It is already too small. How will two of us survive on it? Friend,
Excuse me, please mute yourself. There is a background noise coming. Sorry, Rituparna. Please continue.
So the shepherd says, no, I can't do this to you. It's your farm and you have lived on it for so long. The farmer would have none of it. He said, this is it. This is my share of the land. This is yours. You go ahead and farm, and we will continue to live together like we've always done. The shepherd agreed, and they spent some more years growing crops on that land. Until one year, the shepherd, who was now a farmer, he was digging one corner of the ground, his share of the farm, when he discovered a big bag of gold. He picked up that bag of gold and he ran to his farmer friend and said, look here, my friend, look, I found this on your land, a bag of gold. All your worries are gone forever. You never need to farm again. And the friend said, well, wait a minute. It was found on your part of the farm. So that's yours. It's not mine. And the shepherd, who was now a farmer, would have none of it. He said, no, it was your kindness, your generosity. You gave me that piece of land, but it is always yours. If I find something, it belongs to you. Now, the two friends who had never fought for anything, they decided they were fighting because they wanted to give the other the bag of gold. The two friends took it to the headman. The headman was a wise teacher, and he taught all the pupils in that village. When the headman heard of this dilemma, he turned to his students and said, well, here is a dilemma for you to solve. Which of the two should get the bag of gold? Tell me why. Well, the first eager beaver said, well, if none of them want it, well, just go dig it again and leave it there. That's a good one. But the wise teacher said, that's not what I expected. Well, what about you? He asked the second one. And the second one said, well, master, if none of them want it, they have brought it to you. So it belongs to you now. You can choose to do whatever you like. Now, the wise teacher was really upset with this young student. He said, no, that's not what we will do. He turned to the third one, hoping that the third one would have an answer. Well, the third student said, well, master, this bag of gold was found in the ground, and this ground ideally belongs to the Sultan. So maybe the bag of gold should go to the Sultan and he will decide what he wants to do with it. The teacher was not happy again. He was almost losing hope when he turned to the fourth student, the fourth pupil, and asked, do you have a suggestion? The fourth pupil was waiting for his turn. He said, yes. If neither of the two men will want it, then we should spend it wisely. Maybe spend it wisely on people who need some hope. How about using this money to get a land and to grow a garden where the poor, the poorest of poor, the homeless can come and live. They can find hope, they can find dignity, they can find rest, and they can find care and shelter. How about that? Now, the teacher was very pleased with his fourth student. A+, 10 on 10 for him. He said, he looked to the farmer and the shepherd, and they seemed to agree and said, well, yes, here you are, young man, take this bag of gold, go and decide how we're going to spend it. You have a plan. Let's see you put it into action. And so the young pupil took that bag of gold and he walked on towards the big city. Before he left, his master said, here is a piece of land where we can build this beautiful garden that you have described to us. So come back, go and find the best seeds that there are on this land, and we will sow the garden for the poor. This pupil, he kept walking, thinking and imagining, designing the architecture of this beautiful garden. The lovely trees, the blossoms, the fragrance, the shade, the pools of water, the seating arenas, the resting spaces for the young, for the old, for the infirm. He kept dreaming about this garden of beautiful garden for the poor when he reached the city. In the marketplace, when he walked in, he was shooed away. Wait, move, make room. He was pushed to a corner because in came a caravan of camels. Camels loaded with cages. Cages which had trapped birds inside them. Beautiful birds. The blue, the yellow, the green, the orange, the magenta, the white, the blacks, the browns, all the colors that you can imagine in the world. All the birds were trapped. The legs were tied, they were hung upside down, their feathers were dusty and brown. They looked almost lifeless. If only you looked close, you would see that their eyes still had life in them, but their spirits were gone. One caravan after the other, each of these camel carriages had cages full of birds. This young student, the pupil, had never seen anything like that. He stopped and asked the caravan seller, What? Where are you taking these birds? The camel rider said, well, these are for the Sultan. All of them will be taken to the king's palace, the Sultan's palace. He's going to eat some of the juiciest birds, and then he's going to pluck off all the beautiful feathers and decorate his palace with it. These birds are rare. We caught them from all over the land, and the Sultan has decided to pay a price for it. They're expensive, rare, beautiful birds, delicious too. Only a Sultan can afford these birds. They're not for you. Get it on. And the young people said, well, I have money. I want the birds. And the camel said, you get out of the way. Do you know this goes to the Sultan and only the Sultan? The pupil took out his bag of gold and he said, yes, this is it. I'm going to buy all the birds that there are and more if you catch them. He gave him the bag of gold and he took possession of all the cages. One by one, he opened each cage, and he untied the birds. He fed them water, he fed them some grains. He picked them up and cleaned their feathers, and he patted them close to his heart till they were warm enough, till their hearts beat a little faster. And then when they had rested, he let them go, and the birds flew up into the sky. The pupil spent an entire day doing this. By the time he had finished, he realized that he had nothing else to do in the city. He picked up his little belongings, and empty-handed, he turned around and started walking back home. Every step that he took was difficult for him. His feet grew heavier and heavier and heavier, and the weight of not fulfilling a dream lingered on his heart and his mind. By the time he reached his own village, he stepped onto that land that they had decided to buy, and he sat there and he wept. He wept out loud because he had lost it. The dream that he had given everyone was never going to be fulfilled. The gold was gone, the coins were gone, there was no money. What would happen to that garden? But this little pupil didn't know that of all the birds that he had set free, there was a little one who kept following him from a distance, following and flying right behind him. And the little bird sat and saw the pupil weep and cry and feel sad. And the little bird unknowingly heard his pain. And the little bird decided to fly back. He flew back and he chirped all around in the sky, and he called all his magical bird friends, and they all flew down to find that pupil sitting on the ground, all lost, sitting all alone. They flew around him, like Sudhaji's story right in the beginning. The birds flew all around him. They descended on the ground and they bowed in front of the pupil. And just before his eyes, the little birds started using their little feet to dig the ground. Some others picked up the bigger stones and rolled them as far as they could go. The bigger, larger birds, they flew up into the sky and they flew distances to find the rarest of seeds. They came back and the birds by then had prepared the ground. They sowed the seeds. The birds flew to the water. They carried water in their beaks and they dropped water onto the ground. Some other birds cleared the ground to make a little pond. The birds carried water again in their beaks to fill it up. And like magic, they used their wings to fan and blow hot breath onto the ground that they had sowed. And within seconds, little plants grew out of the ground. plant grew and grew and grew and grew into a beautiful tree. There were leaves and there were flowers and there were fruits. The pond had filled up and the garden started getting more and more prettier. The pupil sat looking at this wonderful transformation around him. And he saw all the birds working so tirelessly to make his dream a reality, with no money, with no seeds that he could buy from him. The garden was really blooming and faster than he would have done it himself. The trees grew, there were beautiful flowers, and there were fruits. On one particular tree, there were golden apples. News traveled far and quick all across the town, all across the kingdom, that there was a magical garden which had sprouted out of nowhere within a day. The richest of rich got up on their carriages and they traveled. Of course, a beautiful garden with golden fruits belonged to the rich, of course. It must be the Sultan's gift to all the riches that he owned. But just as the rich gathered and came close, the wall around the garden grew higher and higher and higher and higher. The stone fence got stronger and stronger and stronger, so high that nobody could climb it. And not just that, the gate swung close, and 7 locks appeared on the gate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The rich looked at this garden right before them, but they couldn't get it close. So one of them decided to take his horse as close to the wall, get up on the horse, and maybe with his hand, he hoped to reach out for that one golden apple, which he believed belonged to only him. But just as if it was out of reach, the horse moved away, and the rich man fell on the ground. Another one tried, and no matter what they tried, none of the rich folks could even touch the golden apples. Well, by now, the poor, the infirm, the feeble, the marginalized, the ones who are never counted, the ones who are left behind, they heard of the garden too. They came on foot, because they didn't have the carriages, they didn't have the wagons, and they didn't have the horses to reach there on time. So they took their time, they walked. And just as if the garden knew that the people had arrived, the 7 locks opened again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and the door swung open. And the people walked inside the garden. They washed their hands, they washed their faces, they drank the sweet, clean water. They plucked the fruits. They bit into it. They rested in the arenas. On the soft grass, they sang lullabies. Mothers sang lullabies to those little children. The infirm lay down to feel rest. They spent a beautiful day from morning till evening. And once the sun was set, they all came out again to return to where they came from. Only the ones who had nowhere to go decided to stay the night there. Once they had left, the gates closed again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The locks kept the people safe inside it. And that's the story of the magic garden, a folktale from Kazakhstan.